Let's go ahead and get our work session started. I don't really need to call it to order because it's, do I have to call to order, Corey?
Nah.
Okay. Call to order. Yeah, because, we're not, it's on tape but not on tape. So Corey, you did a fantastic job putting this together, so I'm just gonna basically push that over to you and let you lead this whole meeting.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out tonight at 6. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of a background, I guess, for the benefit of the public. We've been talking about infrastructure for a long time, predating me and other councils and things like that. And so when I got here last year, we were talking about millage proposal for the November ballot. And it was staff's recommendation at that time after taking a quick look at this issue and talking with which is our bonding consultants, that we push pause on that. And what I asked the council to give us some time to do was, one, let me familiarize myself with our water sewer funds. And we presented that analysis at our December goal setting. That was the first part of that meeting. And really that showed a picture that wasn't extremely pretty. The funds themselves have a lot of obligations and a lot of needs that are coming in the future. And so we talked about what that means for the fund's ability to handle major repairs, replacement, and then other infrastructure at like the plants that we have for water and sewer, as well as the underground infrastructure. Since then, I've had a lot of time to get familiar with it through the budget process, so we continue the conversation at our April budget session. And then in the intervening months, I've spent a lot of time researching, talking to people, thinking about how do you engage your community on what I think is a really big topic, probably the biggest topic that we have facing us, which is a need that's in the multi-millions of dollars without the revenue to support that. And having been here now for close to a year, I think I can say honestly that I hear a lot of concerns from residents about the rates on the water and sewer side, about the tax rates, which we are responsible for a piece of, but it's paid at the city, and so people associate their tax bill with the city of Williamston. As everybody's aware, there's a lot of villages that are on there, many of which are for things outside of this community, but nonetheless, it is the rate that we have. So with all of those things said, I've really felt strongly that we have to engage the public properly and in a meaningful way. And the word that I've stolen from some articles is deliberative engagement. And so I just put together a very brief memo that kind of lays out where my head's at on how I think we should approach this. Basically, what I've laid out is that we would use a focus group idea to try to poll a wide variety of residents from the community in sort of a small group situation over a 2-meeting period of time with a lot of information to educate our residents about the issue, and then in the second meeting to follow up and start brainstorming ideas. I've taken the framework from another community, so I've got more details if that's a decision we want to go down. So I present that to you in the memo format for discussion tonight, in recognition that there has been a lot of thought at the council level about this issue. And what I think has been missing is that engagement with the community, not just about the issue, but about the solutions that are out there. And so while it would be perfectly fine for a council to make that decision and put your best foot forward with that decision, what I am recommending, based on everybody I've talked to and the case studies that I've looked into and a lot of the research, is that there really needs to be this extended period up front before that decision's made, to help inform that and to help bridge that communication between council and the residents. In many ways, I think it would be our biggest public outreach engagement process that we've probably embarked on in a long time. And so that's daunting because we're the same staff we were yesterday. So I think it would be a lot of work. But I also think I've gotten the sense from this board that there's a real interest in being transparent and helping people understand the decision-making process that we've come to do these issues. And so a big piece of this is that we're not going into it with a preconceived notion or an idea of what the solution is, but that we actually trust the process and hope that there's a collaborative consensus that comes out of that, that we can tailor to our community to try to build support for an adequate solution for the issue. So I didn't want to take too much time with that intro, but that sort of is why we're here tonight. I wanted a work session format. It's a little bit less formal, but it also gives us a chance to kind of talk through things a little bit more than what we might in a discussion item on a regular agenda. And really what I'm looking for is, is this the right path? Is council comfortable with this? Is there support to do a process like this? And if not, what other direction should we potentially go down?
So I have a quick question for you. You have the 10 million in here.
Yeah.
In dollars and cents is going to be the biggest thing that everybody's going to focus on. Is that a number or is that just an example?
That is a fairly conservative estimate of the number. If you remember back to some of our earlier work sessions, we actually had Scott McBreeze, our city engineer, go through a list of priorities, and there's 1A through I think 1F. And that's basically just to deal with the underground issues and roads that are both combined to be issues.
Yep.
And so that's where that number came from, just to deal with those first 1A through 1F streets.
And then, I know that we've discussed it a couple different times, and I think that we probably do have it ready, waiting. I know that Scott had brought in all of the samples of literature and everything that his Spring Arbor community did. And so we have all of that we can use in these engagements with the public and that type of stuff. So then my question would be, and I know you don't have it out here and it's probably something we have to discuss, but what is your ideal time frame if we start soliciting for a public engagement or bringing pockets of people together? What does that timeline look like to you?
Sure. So I would envision this being we would do our engagement in the summer months, potentially into the fall, depending on schedules and how that works. And so in coming to you tonight with that, that does put us in a precarious position if we were trying to do something for the fall.
Yeah.
And so,
August deadline.
right.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
part of the discussion I wanted to have tonight was there's obviously pros and cons to that. I think a benefit is that we can truly do some real engagement that I'm hopeful will get an answer that will be more palatable to the community. The second piece is if you don't do a special election, then you don't have that added cost.
Right.
You can tie it to another election. And so if we did a process that bled into the fall, you'd be looking at some kind of measure on the ballot next year where we have at least 2 elections, likely more than that. There's usually a lot.
Yeah, because there's
2020
primary.
would be a huge one because of the presidential.
Well, exactly, and we'd have primaries and stuff like that, so we'd be able to tag onto that where it wouldn't be necessarily our own cost for special election.
Correct.
So being transparent, what's forecasted to be on the November ballot right now as it sits? Because I thought NISA's coming up due 2020. So my thing is, I don't want to put something on there and then bombard the public with all these other financial stuff and everybody just be like, no, and nobody actually look at the facts of what's being presented in front of us. I don't want to rush it either.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
rushing it seems like we're trying to slip something by.
Holly could find out, probably from Ingham County and everything, what the ballot proposals and everything will be for this upcoming November, because obviously the deadline is August. And then she would probably be able to give us the calendar of when these other special elections would happen. But I think the biggest thing, and one thing that I've always said is that if we get out and we educate our voters why they should vote yes on this and why they should research the other millages that are on those ballots and be informed instead of just, it's a feel-good vote, I'm gonna vote yes, or I'm just gonna vote no straight down the board. I think that could help us be able to get people to vote yes on this. It's the whole education process and making them realize that they need to be educated voters when they walk into that poll and know, why are you voting yes on the animal shelter or no on the animal shelter, or why are you voting yes on NISA or 911 or,
Right.
you know, the Capillary District Library, because all of those millages touch their wallets, but do they get direct benefit from it? Do they use those services? And
How do you all plan to educate this public if we try to go to them and we do it, I don't know what we do, but I help if we can, seriously.
Yeah.
I almost am of the belief that if we set up 2 open forum, town hall meetings, and promote the heck out of it,
Mhm.
this is your chance to find out, this is your chance to give input, and they're gonna hear one story, because otherwise they might hear 5, 6 different stories.
Right.
Right.
Or what happens to me, I've given enough speeches to know
Mhm.
people don't even listen. And the people that listen only retain a little bit of what you say.
Mhm.
It's funny, the things you think you said so clearly, they'll come up, what did you say about, where is this list
Right.
of names? And it's like, where were you at? Just a minute ago, I saw you sitting there, you know? So we could run around and work really hard at this, and I think that's great, but I think if we put the onus back on them, if they don't come to something where it's just opening up to them to really tell them we want to listen and
Mhm.
focus on maybe 2 dates, and then we control the whole thing.
Yep.
It's not like, well, I was planning to get to the seniors, and I didn't make it, or whatever.
Right.
Do you have any other thoughts of exactly how we can pull this off?
I think-
Do the best job, reach the most people.
And I think a lot of it too, Ken, and you make a good point, but it's also going to be using every single avenue we have, inviting LSJ out to those, you know, open sessions, having somebody write a specific piece on it, with having this, you know, being the transparent,
Right.
you
I
know,
mean, we can
council
get it
that
on.
we are being,
We can get it online now.
and just blasting it out there to the point where people are just like, wow.
So real quick, I know that the governor's been proposing this gas tax and stuff like that.
That helps.
I got a little bit of education on it today at work.
Mhm.
I think that people need to really dig in and look at that, but also having something, whether it goes through or not, finalized before anything is pitched is gonna be tremendous.
Yeah.
You know, knowing where funding's coming from, where money's going. I mean,
Dan?
I guess I want to back up just a second, because I think if I'm listening to Corey correctly and what I'm reading here is the staff's idea is that the public actively engages in crafting the millage that we, the millage language that we end up going for, and I think there's good with that. I guess if we decide to go that way, as a council, we need to understand that whatever comes out of those sessions, we have, you know, we need to live with that, because I don't think we can go to them, actively engage with them, help them craft it, then us go, well, that's not really what we were looking at.
Right.
Um,
Well, it's gotta be a very, very open and honest conversation with those residents, with those focus groups, however you wanna, you know, I'd love to see 200 people show up at a focus group, I know that's not gonna happen. And that's, you know, at the end of the day, that's not even a full 5% of our population here that can vote. But word of mouth spreads, and people that come to them, you know, that actually are like, wow, the city really wants to do something, and we have the ability to give input on it, we could be very pleasantly surprised. And you're right, Dan, we have to have a common agreement with the residents to determine, you know, what we put forward. Because if they say, you know what, we want 7 mills, and we still try to push 10 mills, they're gonna vote no, you know?
Yeah, and I just know there's HOA, the condo HOA association over by Spags. They put out a survey of their folks, because they have to redo all their streets in there, they have their own wells and all that, and They were trying to figure out how to take care of it, and the board put out a survey, and the survey results came back, they gave them like 4 options, and the board goes, well, we did this survey, but it's not what we wanted. We wanted option 1, but the residents picked option, and that was a big fight among them. It's
Yeah.
like, if we go this route, it's kinda, it would be awful tough to tell the residents if, I don't know. That's my worry, is if we're going into, I don't know.
Well, I think you gotta have a good base
Yes.
layer and
That-
let the conversation take shape from there.
As part of this process, we would prepare a variety of, I think, easy to read, easy to understand materials. And it basically falls into 2 steps. The first step is really about education. One of the things that really has jumped out to me is, Scott will tell you that about 20, or let me back up. 25% of our customer base experiences some kind of water quality issue because they're on an old cast iron water main. You know, to be clear, we don't have lead issues, we don't have PFAS. It really comes down to cast iron mains that were put in the early 1900s, and so you're dealing with rust deposits. So 25% of your customer base is on one of those mains. That means that 75% are not.
Right.
75% have a newer water main or a midterm water main. They're not experiencing those issues. That's a tough,
It is.
yeah, that's a tough sell. And so part of the thought process behind the the focus group concept is that you really try to do it in a way that spreads the people throughout the community so that you've got representation, and you would be sitting in a room with some folks that, you know, maybe live on one of the newer water mains, newer subdivisions with folks that are, you know, on a, up in Circle, where we have older infrastructure up there. And that you're getting some of that dialogue and interaction in a smaller setting as opposed to, you know, a larger setting. That would still potentially be part of the process eventually. But in this initial phase, you'd be trying to have more of a dialogue as opposed to speak at a podium, you know, to the council. And so that's kind of how we would try to help with that, is by breaking it up into a couple different groups, and each group might come up with a different solution, but ultimately, you know, what's the overriding sense? That's sort of the framework that we're sort of envisioning there.
Well, excuse me, but, this meeting was publicized, correct?
Yes.
Would you guys mind if I tell them to calm down a little bit? Because the noise is really good too.
Yeah.
The sad truth is, people either don't care or they don't listen. I mean, they trust us to do it,
Right.
so we might as well kind of make some of these decisions. Give them a choice of A, B, and C, and all of them are good for.
Yeah.
So before we go through this and, you know, have these groups, are we gonna have some sort of plans laid out, that they'll, different versions, and maybe give them something to brainstorm or come up with on top of that? But, I mean, personally, when I sit here and I think about the roads, I think about it like the school did, kind of the sinking fund. We need something where that money is dedicated strictly for roads,
Well, and
or the infrastructure in general.
I think
And-
if you put a millage through and you have it state specifically in your millage language, you
Right.
can't use
But-
those funds for other things.
But here's the thing, it's always needs to be there, that's the thing. It's one of those things that even if you say you go for 10 million and that's just, you know, being conservative with just what needs to be fixed, it's gonna meet its end life again, and then there's other sections of town, so
Right.
it needs to be educated out that, hey, this is like something that's gonna be revolving.
Right.
You know, kinda like you put tires on your car, it's, you're gonna have to eventually come around and do it again.
I like the sinking fund concept, but I could be wrong, but I think the way those are supposed to work is they're usually a 10-year lifespan. And the first
Well,
5
right.
years is supposed to take care of like your immediate needs, and then that last 5 years, you build a nest egg that you accrue interest on, and then you use
So-
that.
With that, think about what the school just did.
I know.
They came back and they put it back on the ballot again, and
They
it
didn't have
renewed
enough.
again. So I'm using that as an example, it doesn't have to be.
I know, I'm just saying
I know.
that framework, that's how you
Yep.
get that continuing nest egg if you could work out.
But to educate the people that this is something that's gonna be continuous and revolving, and it's not just a one-time, here we go, fix, and then your taxes are gonna drop, you know?
Right.
That's the reality of it.
Do you have any thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, well, so 2020 is gonna be a huge election year.
Yeah.
I think we put it out there without proper education, social media, and doing something. And I like the way that Ken's thinking. Because quite frankly, I think if we have a large voter turnout, then if we don't do that, it's gonna be turned down in a hot second. So whatever is done has to be done right and has to be done in a big way. Or else I think it's gonna fail.
Here's a
Yep.
question, just thinking out loud here. What about reaching out to the service organizations? You have the concerts in the park, you have Jubilee, you have the
I think
National Night Out, things like that, where you're gonna see all different sorts of people and crowds and.
I think
you know.
that has to be a part of the plan too, is
So
engage with them.
I don't disagree at all. You know, having been to most of these service organizations now in the last year, I would say, one, there's a lot of overlap between the groups. Two, a lot of the members are township residents, so they're not voters. And three, it's a very particular subset of the community. And so, while I think that's an important piece of it, because you are capturing a lot of our very involved residents, you're missing all the families, you're missing the people that, they're not here because they got baseball.
Right.
And that's where this idea of doing something more targeted, in the summer months where there's a lot going on, but it's not quite as busy maybe as when you're in the school year, and you have kids at home or obligations, you know, with plays and practices and all these things. That's the piece of this that I've been thinking a lot about. You know, how do you engage with that group of people that they're voters, but they're leading their lives, they're busy, and they're probably not going to come to an open forum. You know? And so maybe that targeted specific invite is how you get them, you know, into a smaller setting, you know, for an hour to an hour and a half to just talk about the issue, and get them engaged.
I think that's a very good point, that, you know, that is the group that we need, that's not engaged now for whatever amount of reasons, you know, the 25 to 45 age group, and I'll just say that because for whatever reason, that's the group you've got to figure out how to, because the seniors are already paying attention, you know, they're in it. It's
I don't think it hurts to go to these events though, with,
Right, no,
with
not at all.
good information in hand, and just, you know, as you're walking and circulating through a crowd, you know, are you a Williamston resident? Can I ask you what your thoughts are about this?
No, you're.
Or have that, you know, have that piece of literature that you could actually put in somebody's hand. But I think every possible way to get information out, in addition to those invites, is absolutely a necessity. And taking our time to do it, not rushing, because think about it, it is a presidential election year. That's when you're gonna get the bigger crowd, the bigger draw that's going to go to the polls. That may bode well for us, because you're gonna have a bigger turnout. I mean, think about it, when I ran in 2015, which was not an election year, my total vote tally was 325 votes. You know, that's 10%. I don't remember how many votes you got. How many votes you
It
got?
was 320.
Yeah. So, you know, and you were what year?
Myself.
You were last year, right?
Yeah.
Not 16, 17.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these have all been off presidential years.
Another thing I've
Maybe have a
heard
bigger turnout.
on that note is, if you do it in an off year, you know, you are potentially gonna have a lower turnout, and, you know, that can sometimes be perceived negatively, as far as, are you trying to, you know, slip something
Yeah,
through?
slip something in.
And so, you know, as I really thought about this, you know, doing it in an even year,
Right.
where you've got a couple of chances, and it doesn't have to be November.
Right.
Because there's
Yeah,
probably
you're
gonna be
right.
one in May, and there's probably gonna be one in August.
Right.
That's pretty typical.
My only question is, and I know he's got his list of priorities, and he's done a really good job with it, but what does, we've got the project we're working on this year, does it adversely affect us for a project next year, pushing this to November 2020.
That's good, yeah, and think about it too, you do it in November 2020, you're not doing construction till 21.
Right.
You get it done in May, you might be able to get something on the schedule for late summer, early fall.
I don't like May election, but that's
No,
my,
I don't either.
question is.
Well, you're ending the school year, people are doing vacation, same thing with August, people are still on vacation, they haven't come back for school, so it's really about how we,
Well, you gotta think of construction season and bids going out, so
Right.
if it is passed in November of 2020, you're not gonna see anything until late summer, getting anything through. But at the same time, at least we've got something on a positive note passed, nobody can sit there and say we haven't been transparent. They can say it all they want, but we know we haven't, I mean,
do you know, I mean, yeah, we've got the Middle Street and Mullet and all that. Do you know if Scott has anything scheduled slated for 2020 yet?
No, because there's no funding.
There's no
So,
funding.
Usually what we've done is we've built up our major streets balance, general fund, water sewer, and then we do a project. So
Right.
in middle, the other side of middle 2 years ago,
Right,
and as you guys are aware from our budget, we're tapping fund balance pretty hard for
Yeah.
the second phase of that.
yeah,
The next project that's programmed in that same pot of money would be North Putnam Street from the bridge to the city limits to the north. That's programmed for 2023 to get that $375,000 grant. Now, on that same note, there's another pot of money that we've been exploring. The earliest that we could get that would be 2022. So it would be a difference of a year on.
but those pots of money are road specific, they're
They
not
are.
secondary roads.
Correct.
So with a secondary road issue, like a Bismarck Orchard, you know, or a
Street,
William
yeah.
Street, or a High Street, you know, which those three, I believe, are the top on his,
1928.
You know.
so with that being said, that could be something that with this group gets educated on, that's major streets, right? Or is that not considered major?
These ones that Tammy just mentioned
they're all
are,
secondary.
No, but I mean, like Putnam would be major.
it's a
Right.
major street.
Right.
Yep,
So it does have a couple different pots of money that we can throw at it, but you have to wait your turn,
Mhm.
and you have to have the money. I mean, right now, we're doing this second piece of Middle and Mullet with cash, but, we're using everything we have to do that.
Right.
So there's gonna be some time necessary to accrue that again, to do that second, or the North Putnam section
Right.
up there in a couple of years. But to answer your question, there's not any major, local street projects planned because of the lack of funding,
right.
on those pieces.
Well, I think that has to be a part of the information sessions and stuff, is that we do tap funds that are available to us for roads that qualify. That's gonna be the biggest thing too, I think, that you have to be able to articulate to the residents, cause everybody's like, where's our Flint money? Why don't we get Flint money? We have horrible water, in certain areas of town because of the infrastructure. And it was one thing that Rachel was able to educate me on when I first got on council. And I did, I asked because I went to an MML conference and it was, I can't remember the city name, but it was 20 square miles and they were able to get funding, they were able to do major infrastructure, water, sewer, and surface. And I asked her and she's like, well, we're not a disadvantaged community. So you have to be able to explain that to the residents that, the state of Michigan says our residents make enough money, that they should be able to bear some of that in a millage, and we're not disadvantaged. Now, does that mean that other funding sources might come available if there's a federal infrastructure program or state money opens up and you can apply for it for secondary local streets?
I guess the big thing is we need to show them what we have control of as a city
Yes.
versus what trickles down from the state, because that's huge. Everybody's like, well, we already pay this in our gas tax and our insurance and our driver's registration and all that. And I just don't think anybody knows or has the accurate, hey, this is where it goes.
Well, the majority of those funds today are used for maintenance activities, plowing,
Mhm.
salting, patching,
Yep.
right-of-way maintenance.
Right.
And so there are some examples of what we would receive under that 45-cent increase. It would potentially pay for the engineering for a project, but it's.
So
it's
here's
not
the other
gonna
thing,
work.
having it to show what we spend, hey, this is what it costs us to
Yep.
maintain the roads in the wintertime, and we can't stop doing that to pave a road.
Right,
So, I mean,
well, we've
I
always
think
that-
talked about that.
I think that's a huge part of the education piece, would be showing from the last gas tax hike and the last vehicle registration, what we got from that. This is what trickled down to Williamston, and this is what that accomplished, because that's gonna be one thing we're going to hear about is, well, we're talking about this next gas tax hike, can't they just pay for this? So if we have the example from the last one, this is what this did, this is what we got.
And I know the council has explored, what was it, income tax?
Income
or
tax, yeah.
For the city and, you know, throwing.
But Kent, what was that gonna generate per year? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was somewhere in the 600,000
Right,
range.
so that's a block.
Right.
That's a block of repair. If we were to generate 600,000, because Scott says it takes about, what, 500,000 to do a block section, if you had to go all the way down to do water, sewer, and new surface.
Between 5 and 800.
Right, depending on
What else is
the severity of it,
But having that information along with, you know,
yes.
Yep. And
you
that,
know, apples to apples. just-
as I envision this, all that would be part of that first session, the education, the informational piece, so that people are armed
Yeah.
with information to help talk, about potential issues.
Well, it'd be nice to be able to show people historically, what have we actually thrown against the wall to see if it would stick? That it would benefit the community, or that we felt that, we would get a no vote no matter what, type of thing. And for the community to understand that, this takes a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of hard decision-making to be able to come to them and finally say, we have a plan, but we can't put this plan forward without your input, your vote, and your dollars.
so, here's a question for Bria. How much would Scott be involved in these meetings going with the public?
I think,
I mean, what are you envisioning in
yeah,
this?
so I think that we would both be present during the informational meetings, and then I'd have to give a little bit more thought to about the second meeting, where we're actually kind of workshopping through ideas. Ideally, we would have somebody that is well-equipped in running those kind of things, doing that, but you probably can't do that without paying some money. And one of the whole goals of all this is gonna try to just do it with our in-house talent. And so I think it would likely be me doing that. And so,
Not that you need
You mean
anything else to do.
facilitating the
but
meeting?
this is
Yeah, I know.
ultimately one of council's biggest
This
goals,
is probably the biggest of,
Mhm.
looking at it.
Well, one of the concerns I have is I hear different points of view here, it's all great information. I like the idea of educating people, getting people out, I like Kent's comments about how do you draw that. So, Corey, you're saying the facilitator would probably be you and your staff. Is there some point or plan, or I think there should be some point or plan, because we get scope creep, when you start getting too involved, you do it. But how do you assess? So say you have that first meeting, we don't get the draw we want. Do we reassess and go back and do 2 short meetings and then move forward? Or do we keep going on until 2020? We have to have some sort of peer action review
Yeah,
Right.
at each step, so that we're not just spinning the wheels
yeah.
as we move forward.
So here's,
I think that's a great idea.
here's the question, are we able to go door knocking, like, certain parts of town, asking people to come to these meetings, so it's a personal, not just a letter in the mail, or, a Facebook post or
You
something
have,
like
you
that?
have to have.
Yeah.
Are we able to do
At
that?
each step of involvement, what we do like in our company, you set up pieces of equipment, what do you get back, you look at the data, well, that's not working.
Right.
What do you do next? There's a
Gotcha.
point where you make a decision,
Okay.
this is where we have to go.
Yep.
Because again, our audience today,
Right.
you could put out a quick tweet and say, oh, Williamston's gonna raise the taxes by X amount, it's going to raise $20 million, come and talk to us. Call us and
Right.
You'd have the doors filled.
Well, and I
Now
like
that
what.
you said that the next meeting, we'll be
Right.
back, so.
Well, and Jeff makes a very good point. We
But
have to
there's an
use,
assessment.
every single tool we have available to us. And if it means we go knock door to door and we take that literature that would be handed out during a open session, like Corey's explaining, and saying, here's what's gonna be discussed, we really would like input, available dates, or, you know, you can email our city manager, City Hall at this, and, you know, that's the only way we're gonna find out if it's gonna work, is to just, like I said, you start throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. But I like all the ideas of how can we engage and get the feedback that we need.
Well, I think I like Noah's comment quite a bit, because I'm hearing that there's not necessarily universal support for what I've laid out. But I think it's something we could try, and if we don't get the results that I'm hoping we're gonna get, then we say, you know what, maybe that's not where we should be investing all of our time and energy.
Right.
And a lot of this discussion in my head has come down to, you know, one of these principles you learn early in public administration school, which is there's the delegate model and the trustee model of government. And I'm probably gonna get them wrong, but one of them is that, you know, I think it's the trustee, that the citizenry is entrusting the council to make the decisions on behalf of them. The delegate is that you're there representing them specifically, right?
Yep.
And that's been in my head a lot through this, because I think that ultimately, and I think what I hear Kent saying is, that's what you're here for. You've been entrusted to do that. But I think more and more I'm hearing a lot, and I'm talking to colleagues and reading the you know, the articles that I've enclosed with you, that I think some of the more forward-thinking organizations are trying to do a better job of actually getting out there and getting some of that representative feedback before they make those decisions. And what really kind of put me over the edge was I tracked pretty closely last year in August and November, the millages. Most of them were for roads that were up, and there weren't any in our county, but there was a few in our neighboring counties. And I think there were 6, and all 6 failed. Some of them were really close, just a matter of a couple, 10 or dozen votes or so. But ultimately, I think when I looked at how those communities went through it, they did it more in the trustee model, where they said, this is what we think we need, here's the information, and they all failed. And so when I've talked to some communities that have been successful, there was this prolonged period of engagement before it even went to the ballot. And, you know, I've talked to Meridian Township, they've had some success in that regard. You know, with previous millages, now they are doing I think it's a $30 million road bond on an upcoming election, where they've done it a little bit differently. But this keeps playing in my head when I think about communities that are situated similarly to us, but at the end of the day, you know, a lot of our neighboring counties also don't have the tax rate that we have. And that's what gives me the most concern, because that's what I've heard a lot being here for almost a year is, you know, the taxes are really high. And it's hard to answer that, because we're 15 mills out of 57. You know, a lot of those have nothing to do with us, and yet we're associated with it. And so I think about, you know, the residents' comments that I hear from that, businesses that I hear from, and I just think we owe it to them to at least try this. And you know what, if nobody shows up and we get a 0 turnout, maybe that tells us all we need to know about trying to do
I
this.
think you need to assess it as you go along.
Yep.
And then readjust the plan accordingly.
You know, and I think that you need to bring a prop, because when Scott brought in that piece of pipe that had been cut out,
Yep.
that was nasty.
Yep, you have to.
Holy fright.
Yep.
Yep.
Man, that speaks more than an inch of paper with stats in it.
Yep, I would totally agree, and he's got pictures too of, you know, what caved in water main looks like, and, you know, bring in, you know.
Televised sewer line.
Well, and the fact is we have that, we have the financials on what it costs to repair a broken water main. We have the financials on, well, and actually explaining to everybody, you know, we got grant dollars to be able to do the televised, you know, putting the cameras through to assess the interior of that. And so we really do have good data that shows what needs attention. You know, I wouldn't want him to put up his scary spreadsheet, because I don't think people would understand that. But if you could, you know, talk in very, you know, talk to the group and not at the group, and say, okay, we know that this area of town needs immediate attention and it needs water sewer surface. We know Plymouth Landing, water sewer is great, but it needs new surface. So here's where that falls on the scale of priority. We know that Williams Street, McCormick Love needs all three. So, you know, I think when you can talk to the people and meet them at their level and explain that, but then give them the data, I can't see why they wouldn't want to vote yes for it, because we do get the, you know, I hate my water, when's my water gonna improve, blah, 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 blah.
Corey's point with, we hear it, you know, you always hear the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yep.
And in Williamston, the water and sewer, the people that have the poor water and sewer are the squeaky wheel. The point that he made with that 75% of the folks that are on newer water main and sewer line, that I didn't realize it was such a disparity. And that's where we have to make, if we're gonna make this thing work, we've gotta figure out how to get that 75% of people to
Vote yes.
To vote
Yeah,
yes.
but, yeah, they may have good water sewer, but they may have poor surface structure and curb structure.
Right.
So you gotta look at it that way, and maybe you bring in his map that shows the yellow, red, black, blue, whatever, not the scary spreadsheet.
Sure.
But you bring that in and say, okay, where do you live at? Okay, well, right now I can tell you this is the quality of your road, quality, and talk specifically to them.
Well, and if we work into the discussion and some of the, you know, we talked a little bit earlier, and we talked even last year, someone about trying to find ways to fund this going forward, not just the one millage, but, you know, all encompassing. And if you talk to that 75%, hey, you're fine now, but in 20 years, how is your main gonna be, and if we don't do anything?
The other thing is, some of
Figure out
these
a way
water
to-
mains might be newer, they could still be 20 years old,
Sure.
you know?
Yes.
Or 30 years old to the 50, 60-year-old water mains.
Well, and I hate to say it too, but you know, 20 years from now, a person that lives over in Orchard, you know, they may be sitting there going, all right, well, if I vote yes for it, it's definitely gonna help my resale value, because they know in 10 years, maybe they're moving to Arizona or Florida because they're looking at retirement. So it's, if they vote yes, it actually benefits them in the long run, whereas, you know, somebody trying to sell their house right now on Williams Street, and people, you know, go onto social media or read things or hear from other people that live here that, wow, bad water, you know? Granted, houses turn over pretty quick here in Williamston because people do want to live here, but I'm just saying.
Well, look at it this way, if 75% of the people don't have a problem with their water, if they don't, 100% of the people notice the roads.
Yes,
So we can do some visuals.
yep.
I mean, you could even do a videotape with somebody driving down the road.
Right.
And, you know,
Right.
I'm serious,
No,
we could do that when we went down to, where'd we go, Brighton? Yeah, when we went down to Brighton, we had a bunch of easels set up with pictures of
Mhm.
bad roads, this, that, and the other thing, pictures of the pipes with it, you know. So they had a nice setup. How many people do you think went through there? Less than 100?
Yeah, somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And they had a few of those, but it also failed.
I know, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
you know?
Um,
So good,
and I-
back to the reassessment
Yep.
and where you go.
Maybe we could put together a short video that could be shown every Thursday night before the band plays at the band shell. Thanks for coming to listen to the music, but
Here's a
here's a 2.5-minute spiel on why you need to vote yes.
Make
Pass
music
this
to it.
Piper, huh?
You know,
Right?
How about the Sun Theater before, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
No
they
kidding.
actually do ads.
They do ads.
I have no idea what they charge, but
Yeah, I mean, we do have to use every single
I think
resource
keeping a
available
visual
to
aid,
us.
maybe here at City Hall of what the pipe is when people come to pay their water bill or things like that.
Yes,
will-
yeah, have Scott bring in a chunk and set it right there on the counter.
Or even make a
Look up at the
monument
display.
outside of the drop box too.
start
I
charging
mean-
everyone that comes in with a glass jar of their water, that, why is this coming out of my pipe? We had 12 people in the last month.
And I would say a lot of my discussion tonight's been focused on the water, just because that's what we hear the most.
Yep.
So keep in mind, we're talking about all
Yes,
infrastructure.
we are,
Here's
for
the other
sure.
question, where's the water treatment plant come in with all this?
Or are you guys still working on master plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know, but
Yeah, it's,
I didn't think that that could be incorporated with,
this,
you know,
the way that the village language was worded last year when it was
Mhm.
being discussed, it was not going to cover, the plans. It was focused on the road right of ways, right?
right?
And so the plans, you would still deal with those through your rate structure.
Mhm.
And one thing I should note is, one of the real hesitations I had about that language last year was the fact that, it was proposing to use property tax revenue to pay for infrastructure normally paid for by your water and sewer funds. And I definitely have a lot of philosophical concerns about that. But I have polled some folks that have been in this for a little longer. And I think I'm coming around to that, because we really are focused on a total solution in our roadways. I think the city has done a good job, this council and previous councils, of trying to do what they call a dig once philosophy, right? Where if you're doing that road, you're gonna try to address the things underneath it as well.
Yep.
So that you're not doing the road and then coming back in 10 years and doing the pipe. And so from that perspective, I think that I personally have come around on that a little bit as far as, that one
So
road right-of-way solution.
visual aid wise, having pictures of a water main blowout for the next one, and then what transpires, and then now having, to preach this, let's dig once and not have to go back and get brand new road surface and then patch it in, and now you have a weak spot in your pavement because you had to join it in there and.
So are we basically thinking we're gonna schedule some meetings, at least get to the first meeting, see how many people come, see what's going on, and assess from there? Is that what we're?
So,
I-
with that being said, if we do that, probably need to look at a evening meeting possibly?
Yeah, so the way that I've kind of laid it out here is we would truly do a random sample of our voter list. And you would basically send out targeted invites to those folks to do a focus group. I need to do a little bit more discussion to find out what's a good number for that. I've been able to tap into this local facilitators group to just get some input, where it's just pick up the phone and give me some input as opposed to come and be our facilitator. And so that I need to get some input as far as, what's too big for a focus group type setting. It might be 15, it might be 20. That's why there's this thought that you would have a couple of them, assuming you even had the people responding.
Right.
And so what I propose is that, we basically design that process, get the letters out, set a couple dates for the first one or two groups, see what kind of response we get, and then go from there.
I think that's a great idea, and I'd like to see the literature in draft form that would be used. I think that would be helpful to all of us. And put together a timeline, pick out some dates, get them to us. I don't know if that's something you can do before the June 10th meeting and give us your timeline in email form of what you're proposing. I don't think we need another work session unless you feel you want us all in a room to look at the draft material. But I definitely would like to probably wrap this up so we can do a restroom break if we need to, because we're 9 minutes out from starting council.
Are you gonna want us at these?
Unless you're randomly selected, I would say no.
That's all I
No.
For the focus group, we don't.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, because we have a biased opinion of what we want, and it really needs to be organic and let Corey have that interaction with those residents, and Scott, and, maybe Holly or Barb here taking minutes and that type of stuff.
So with that being said, is that something you wanna put on video and put out there so other people can see too and?
Not initially.
No.
No, I would say minutes, probably, you wanna capture what's
They're-
being
they're
said,
not
but not
public
videotaped.
meetings. It's not a board, it's not an ad hoc committee, it's a focus group. And so I think the goal of a focus group is to try to have very frank discussions with your
Yeah.
group. use that feedback to inform your process. And I'm not an expert in running these, but, you know, I'm trying to tap some of these resources that we have around here to help, you know, understand what those look like and move forward with it.
Alright. Let's take a short break before we come back at 7 o'clock for our council meeting. We gotta wait for Holly to get
Do
in
we,
here
do
anyways.
we need an action item to move this forward, or no?
No, because this is a work
Okay.
session. I think Corey's got his